And in 2010, it happened. It happened to a car. It happened to a driver that was driving for Roger Penske. Brad Keselowski in the 12. Car Everts clipped him. And Brad Keselowski would suffer the same type of crash that Car Everts suffered in 2009. 2010 spring race at Atlanta, at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. The same thing that the same problem that sent Car Everts airborne. The trunk slightly opened up, lifting the rear. Even though the rear flaps were deployed on that 12, the car literally was sailed airborne, and it slammed into the wall on its roof before it landed back on its wheels. The car tomorrow was a dangerous. The car tomorrow the danger level increased. The wing and the splinter of the car. And it's not just the wing that was the problem. The front end was also a problem, because when the car split, because dozens of cars would suffer damage, not just by collision with another driver, not just by collision with the outside retaining wall or the inside retaining wall. With that undercarriage to the front end, it would dig into the grass. It would dig into grassy infields in the track, and it would cause heavy damage to the front end of that car. So that created another problem with the car tomorrow. And even when that rear wing was gone in 2010, and we went back to the traditional rear spoiler, that front end splitter was still a problem, because that front end would get heavily damaged when it made contact with the grass. And it happened from 2010 all the way up to 2016. Even with the Gen 6, the grass became a problem with that splitter in the front end of the Gen 5 and the Gen 6. And Chase Elliott suffered that. Yeah, Chase Elliott, he suffered massive damage when his car sped into the infield grass in the trial in the 2016 Daytona 500. The front end undercarriage dug into the grass, and in the front end of the 24 car driven by Chase Elliott, it suffered massive damage after that impact. And that created a huge problem for the Gen 6 and the Gen 5. The Gen 6 was implemented. The Gen 6 was born in 2013. In the 2013 Daytona 500 was the very first race that was run by the Gen 6. And the drivers really didn't like the Gen 6 either, because Denny Hamlin even spoke out about it. And the Gen 6, that he wasn't really thrilled about the Gen 6 car, but Kevin Hart, drivers, they spoke out in both the Gen 5 and the Gen 6 series. Kyle Busch gave his opinion on the Gen 5, and Denny Hamlin in 2013 gave his opinion on the Gen 6. That's the two positive things that Brian France did ever since he became CEO. Focus more on driver safety. Making sure that no fatalities occurred in the top 3 series. Making sure that problem in the Bill France Jr. era was not repeated. In the 2000 from the 1972 to 2000, making sure that problem wasn't repeated again. Until then, and ever since Brian France, and ever since Bill France Jr. and Brian France focused a little bit more on safety, not a single driver passed away in the Sprint Cup Series. Not a single driver passed away in the Xfinity Series. Even in the truck series, not a single driver died. From 2001 all the way up today, all the way up to 2024 today, not one driver has died in the top three series. Brian France literally saved drivers. Brian France, and thanks to Brian France and the safety and this focus on safety. And the CEO that we have now. Steve Phelps. Steve Phelps is now the CEO of NASCAR now. From 2018 all the way to now. He still focuses more on safety. But Brian France was first. Bill France Jr. was the first to bring up that idea. Brian France added on to it, to that idea. And ever since then, not a single driver has lost his or her life in the top three series of NASCAR. There was one driver that died after during the Brian France era, and it was not in the stock car racing, but it was in the IndyCar series. 3-time winner of the Indianapolis 500, Dan Wheldon. He lost his life in a race in the IndyCar race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in 2011. Yeah, the safety barrier did not save every single. The safety barriers, they were there when Dan Wheldon died. It's proves that the safety barriers they didn't save all the drivers. In fact, one driver was not so lucky, and that was Dan Wheldon. He would die even after the safety barriers were installed at Las Vegas. Driver support, and Danica Patrick, she was in the IndyCar series. IndyCar did a 4-lap salute to end that season. The end not only the race but the 2011 season. And since then, IndyCar has raced on less oval tracks than they did back when in the modern day era between 1960 all the way up to 2011. There are very few. I think IndyCar has races in at least 6, maybe 7 oval tracks, and the rest of their schedule is road courses and street circuits. Back before Dan Wheldon's crash, IndyCar raced on at least half of its season. Half of its season were ran on oval racetracks. Like Homestead, they had a race at Homestead, Miami. They had a race at Atlanta. They had a race at Charlotte. Yeah, IndyCar had a lot of oval races in the 2000s. They even had a race at Milwaukee. They even had a race at Nazareth Speedway. Ever since Dan Wheldon they even raced at Pocono. 500 miles. That IndyCar had a 500-mile race at Pocono. From 1970s all the way up to 2011. All the way up to 2012, actually, IndyCar raced at Pocono. There is even a point where IndyCar raced at Daytona. In 1959, I think IndyCar had 2 races at Daytona. 1959 and through 1960, when the track was first built. IndyCar even had a race at Talladega when it was first built in 1969. Yeah, IndyCar had a lot of oval races back then. Back during its early stages before the death of Dan Wheldon. But ever since Dan Wheldon passed away, there were several different IndyCar drivers that died on the oval tracks. There were a couple of them that died in the road courses. Until 2012, IndyCar started focusing more on safety. And now IndyCar has a totally different body than they did when Tony Stewart was in that series. From 1995 all the way to 2001. IndyCar has a totally different body. And Kyle Larson will be driving in IndyCar in 2025. And if the doubleheader is successful, maybe Kyle Larson probably will run in a couple of more IndyCar races besides the Indianapolis 500. He'll probably produce more double headers. He'll probably have more work for Rick Hendrick. It probably will have more work for Hendrick Motorsports. Because that's probably what will happen if Kyle Larson's doubleheader is successful. Carl Evans will probably run more IndyCar races throughout his resume. Because like Tony Stewart, Kyle Larson was once an open wheel driver. He drove in the dirt tracks, in the sprint car, in the low series. He was driving wingless and wing sprints, in 1.5 mile and a quarter mile dirt tracks. A sprint car is an open wheeled car. Kyle Larson has drove those before he went into the Sprint Cup series, before he went into the Xfinity series. A lot of drivers started out their career by racing open wheel on dirt. Tony Stewart, he started racing on dirt. His first asphalt race was driving an IndyCar in the IndyCar series. Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt Jr. They all started their careers out by driving open wheel cars, or for stepping into the big leagues, into stock car racing. But yeah, Brian France. Yeah, that's the positives about. Yeah, but that's the positives about what Brian France did. Brian France focuses more on safety, saving the lives of Jeff Gordon and Michael McDowell, saving countless drivers' lives. In the Gen 5 was created. That's probably the good things of Brian France. So now you have the positives about Brian France, and the heroic things that Brian France did, covering the early stages, the early parts of Brian France's reign as NASCAR CEO. At first things were going pretty well during the Brian France era. From 2003 to 2005, to the car of tomorrow, saving drivers' lives thanks to the safety features. Yeah, that's probably the positive things that Brian France did throughout his career as CEO.